correctional facility and may be monitored and recorded.
Like, prison is a living hell. Every day you got to go through something totally different. Well, after being stabbed once in prison, after having 3 heart attacks, after having a few dizzy spills and fallouts, prison for me has been a living hell.
For more than 30 years, Christopher Dunn has maintained his innocence while locked away in a Missouri prison. For just as long, there have been plenty of efforts to free Dunn. But despite a mountain of evidence in his favor and a judge saying evidence of guilt is lacking, it is an uphill struggle. So how did Christopher Dunn get here? On the night of May 18, 1990, a teenager named Rico Rogers was shot to death while sitting on a porch in Dunn's neighborhood. Chris says he was home when the shooting happened, on the phone with a friend who was giving birth at a nearby hospital. Chris says he had no motive to kill Rico, since he wasn't even familiar with the victim.
Never knew him at all. I never knew his family at all.
Wow.
All I knew is that his family moved into my neighborhood.
The next day, police arrested the then 18-year-old Dunn. He was tried and convicted on the testimony of 2 young boys, ages 12 and 14 at the time, who claimed Dunn shot at them while sitting on the porch around midnight.
His public defender spent maybe a total of 20 minutes with him before she represented him at trial. He was convicted in 45 minutes of jury deliberation, and that was it. I mean, he was an 18-year-old. He was given life without parole plus 90 years. He was initially offered 10 to plead out, and he said, "No way. I didn't do this. I don't want these people to think I did this. I don't want these parents to think I took their child from them. I would never do that." Refused it, and they really threw the book at him.
Both boys later admitted to lying on Dunn because they didn't like him and officially recanted their stories. Neither boy actually saw who pulled the trigger because it was dark. No physical evidence ever linked Dunn to the shooting. In 1991, Dunn was sentenced to life without parole plus 90 years.
It was a 2-day trial with jury selection. So really it was opening, witness statement, witness testimony, closing, 1-day, really it was a 1-day trial. And unfortunately, it's an all too familiar reality for poor, especially Black men in this country. It's quite astounding.
What's a typical day like for you?
Prison is a constantly battlefield. There's like landmines everywhere. You don't know where to walk. You're walking on eggshells in prison. But you have to stand up, or you have to wait until the kitchen is almost empty before you can sit down and eat comfortably. You always have to watch your back in prison. Make sure nobody tries to stab you in the neck or hit you in your gut. You can set someone off just by a stare or just by a simple gaze. So you got to be comfortable with what you're doing, what you say, and how you look, or how you present yourself to them.
Kira Dunn initially met Christopher back in 1999 while working as a volunteer writer for the online magazine Justice Denied. Since then, she has been advocating for Chris's freedom. Through a series of letters, phone calls, and visits, Chris and Kira eventually fell in love. They got engaged in 2007 and married in 2014. You're married to Chris, and you have never spent life outside of prison with him. How has that been?
It's untraditional, definitely. It's different. It's challenging. I feel that if we can make it through these days like this, we can make it through anything. It's lonely, it's sad. We kind of have our little life in 15-minute increments because that's what the correctional phone system allows. When we visit, we can give like I think a 2-second hug and a 1 to 2 second closed mouth kiss, and sit down and hold hands across a big table. And, that's what we have physically, but mentally and emotionally, we have much more.
Kira organized a recent rally in St. Louis, with supporters continuing to push for Christopher's release.
We're begging today. My husband's health isn't good, and we just don't know how much time we have. He served almost 32 years for something he didn't do. And we just don't know how much time we have to wait for the wheels of justice to turn. It's so slow.
If innocence doesn't matter, then guilt doesn't matter, then why do we have loss? What's the point of the legal system?
Now 50, a chance at freedom for Dunn came and went last August when the Missouri Supreme Court refused a petition to hear his case. In 2020, a 25th Circuit judge agreed evidence of guilt was lacking, but that judge stopped short of freeing Dunn, citing a precedent in a 2016 case that says a prisoner who proves their innocence under both thresholds of Missouri law cannot be released unless they're on death row. This is a baffling case because a judge ruled that you were innocent, but did not let you out. How did you feel when you heard that?
To be honest with you, I felt that pain. To hear that man say, with the evidence presented before this court, there is no jury that can find him guilty. And it is apparent before this court that Prisoner Dunn was convicted based on a testimony of a liar.
A judge interpreted a ruling in a past case to mean that innocence could only be recognized for death row inmates. So until Missouri legislators or the Supreme Court overturns Lincoln versus Cassidy, the judge felt he could not let Christopher go even though he said he was innocent.
My issue is there is tons of case law at the federal level where they talk about what is the standard to find actual innocence. And that's the standard. And he met it. And he's still in prison because of a technicality, right? Most people think, right, that guys get out of jail on a technicality. This guy is being held in prison off of procedure, a technicality. I mean, that's mind-blowing.
Have you ever seen anything like this in all your years of practicing law?
I have seen judges say pretty crazy things, but never put it in paper, right? I've never seen a judge say, there's no reasonable juror that would convict this man. No, I have not seen it on paper in a decision. No.
His best shot, I believe, is to get the prosecutor in St. Louis City to invoke the new law that gives her the right to file a motion to allow someone that she thinks is innocent to prove it. So that's what we're focusing on right now.
How are you two going to work together to try and secure his freedom?
Justin, I think, is wanting to try to go back into federal court, which I think is a really big long shot.
We have to stop this! Now Christopher's family hopes Circuit Attorney Kimberly Gardner will bring his case before a judge.
Right now, we have a new mechanism that prosecutors are able to file motions to have wrongful convictions reviewed, but it's like a mini trial. There's still a process where that is impeded by the Attorney General. And there's a process that puts the onerous burden not only on the state, but of the defendant. But what we're here is about utilizing that mechanism in Chris Dunn's case, as well as Lamar Johnson's case. And I believe that we have to do those things.
Have you already taken up Lamar Johnson and Chris Dunn's case?
Right now, we're continuing to review those cases. As you know, those cases are very complex.
I'm sorry.
Lamar Johnson is another prisoner in Missouri whose case resembles Christopher's. Convicted under evidence that has since been refuted and with no physical evidence linking Johnson to the crime, he has been incarcerated since 1995 for a murder he says he did not commit.
At my trial, they did not even present a motive. They never explained why I supposedly did this.
The actual killers confessed.
I think that is an issue in Missouri, where actual innocence is only for individuals on death row. Well, I believe life without is a death sentence, and others share that sentiment. But our Missouri law, actual innocence is only for people on death row.
So if you decided to take this up, let's just say tomorrow, how long would it take if this ran smoothly from you taking up Chris Dunn and Lamar Johnson's cases and then it moving on? How long would this be if best case scenario?
You have to find witnesses from cases where people 30 years ago were in different situations. So there's a lot of work that goes into these cases. We have to make sure, if this is the mechanism, that as the prosecutor, we do a thorough investigation as well as a thorough presentation of the facts and evidence that we have found in these cases where this individual is languishing in prison, wrongfully convicted.
How long has your office had his case?
We've been looking at this case kind of around 2021, And now it's 2022. And we'll continue to look at that case with our investigators, as well as working with Chris Dunn's defense counsel, because he has a right, and we actually have a right to evaluate the case in terms of this new mechanism.
How much hope can you and Chris have at this point that this will be the thing to free him?
Well, we're very hopeful, and yet at the same time, we're afraid to be hopeful because our hopes have been up quite a few times and they've been dashed quite a few times. And after a while, you build up that protective wall around and you're afraid to get too excited or too happy or too hopeful about anything in case it falls through yet again.
Inside Edition Digital reached out to Missouri Governor Mike Parson, who has the ability to fully pardon Christopher Dunn.
If Governor Parson heard about this today, he could just commute Dunn's sentence, correct?
Yes.
Governor Parson declined an on-camera interview with Inside Edition Digital. However, he was asked to respond to our questions via email. In a statement through his spokesperson, Governor Parson said in part, quote, "Federal law could provide a good model for the kinds of procedural safeguards that protect against endless post-conviction litigation that ultimately can undermine the integrity of our criminal justice system." It should be noted that this was not the answer to any of our questions. When asked again in another follow-up, that same spokesperson said, quote, "Our office has no further comment. Thanks." Inside Edition Digital has also reached out to the Missouri Supreme Court. A spokesperson said they could not speculate as to whether a court might overrule any prior court ruling in the future or the grounds on which it might do so, since it is a legislative issue. Inside Edition Digital also reached out to the Missouri House of Representatives, who pointed us to a pair of legislators. Through his spokesperson, Senator Brian Williams' office said he helped pass the bill that is making it possible for Circuit Attorney Kimberly Gardner to take up Christopher Dunn's case. When asked about the possibility of overturning 2016's Lincoln versus Cassidy, Williams said, quote, "Given recent court rulings, the only avenue for a change in Missouri law is to pass new legislation."
Good afternoon.
Williams says this year, Senate Bill 1201 has been filed to allow a person to raise a freestanding claim of actual innocence in any post-conviction proceeding challenging the validity of the judgment. It would also allow a court to vacate or set aside the judgment where the court finds there is clear and convincing evidence that undermines confidence in the judgment. He also filed another bill that would expand the circumstances under which a person who was wrongfully imprisoned can seek damages from the state. The 2022 legislative session ends on May 13th. The other lawmaker did not respond to Inside Edition Digital's request for comment. At the center of all of this remains Chris, just sitting in a cell. A man who a judge believes no jury would convict, with a family and loved ones feeling the pain of his absence every day, and the clock just keeps on ticking.
It's just a little scary because Chris has now had 3 heart attacks. On one of those times, he flatlined and had to be shot back. And his health just is fragile right now. And we don't know how much time we have to wait. We think the good intentions are definitely there. And we appreciate that. We're so grateful, really. But we don't know how much time we have. There's a victim at the center of all this. And I think this gets lost sometimes. There's a young man who was only 14 years old, who had his life taken from him. There's a family who never got to see that child grow up, never got to be grandparents, never got to be aunties and uncles to the kids he may have had. Who knows what that child would have done with their life? Who knows what he would have become? And we never want to forget that. But that child hasn't seen justice, and Chris hasn't seen justice. And so when I look back at that night in 1990, I feel like 2 lives were lost that night. One was quick, and the other is a slow, long death. And it's still going on day by day.
What is the one thing that you want to say? What's the message that you want people to know about you and your case?
I've never killed anyone, stabbed anyone, raped anyone, or done anything to anyone to justify what they're doing to me. I just need the support of society to influence the circuit attorney of the city of St. Louis, as well as the Attorney General of Missouri, to reconsider, give me a true trial, if anything. If you want to let me go, give me a new trial. That's all I ask for is a chance now that I didn't have 32 years ago.
For Inside Edition Digital, I'm Stephanie Officer.